Hi, I'm Johnny Havoc.
And I'm Newt.
We're Simple Tricks and Nonsense, and we're very proud to be a part of Iconicon.
What you're about to see is our exclusive interview for Iconicon with the legendary artist, William Stout. So how are you, William?
Hey, I've been doing great. You know, it's funny. During COVID, I got more work than ever.
Really?
Yeah, and I don't know why. I mean, I know why my internet sales went up. That's because people were sequestered at home. They were bored. They needed something to look at, so they go to my site and buy a book.
Oh, good.
But I don't know why I'm getting so many art commissions. But I'm happy I am.
I'm so glad. Thank you so much for doing this with me.
Oh, yeah.
I really missed seeing you at DragonCon.
Me too. Well, you're going this year, though, right?
Not, unfortunately. I can't make it this year. And I'm so sad, because for some reason I didn't think you would make it out.
Oh, shoot. No, yeah, I'm Artist Guest of Honor this year.
That's awesome.
Okay, so we have, we broke everything up into 3 categories. So we're going to talk about your art, we have your movies, and we have our favorite topic, which is lizard men. So we can kind of take off wherever you want to, whatever direction you want us to take. I'll let you choose.
Okay, let's start with the first category, art.
Okay.
Because that's most of my life.
Have your travels influenced your art?
My travels always influence my art. My advice to young artists is to get out in the world. That will make you a better artist, and you'll see different ways to see things when you leave the country, especially.
Have specific things that you've seen while traveling made it into your art?
Oh, absolutely. I used to be the biggest movie nut you'd never want to meet. I'd go to see everything. I'd go to film festivals. I'd go to movie marathons where you enter the theater on Friday night and you don't come out till Sunday night, and you're watching movies the whole time. And I was living in Hollywood, and I was going to see a new movie. I was real excited. I was walking up the sidewalk on Vine Avenue, and a friend of mine spotted me from his car and pulled over and said, "Hey, Bill, what are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I'm going to go see a new movie." And he looked at me like I was some kind of schmuck. He said, "Really? A movie? Man, 2 hours alone in the dark." He said, "You could be having your own adventures instead of watching somebody else's." And man, that flipped a switch on me. From that moment on, I scheduled a different adventure around the planet each year. And it changed my life. It really opened things up for me. And one of the main things was I had all these beautiful photography books on Antarctica. And all the world's greatest photographers said the same thing. Try as they couldn't capture the color of what was down there. And I thought, well, I don't have those problems because I'm an artist. Anything I see, I can put down on the paper. The photographers had trouble because of the chemicals and emulsions just can't capture that spectrum of color. So I thought, well, that sounds like a great place to go. And then I found out that the Antarctic Treaty, which protected Antarctica, was due to expire in a couple of years, in 1991. And so I thought, I better get down there now before it's closed off to tourism. So I went in 1989, and I was not prepared for how spectacular this place was. And I knew I had to do something to try to save it for my children and grandchildren. And I came up with an idea of showing the abundant wildlife in Antarctica, but also so that every kid would drag their parents to the show, I included, well, half of the show became prehistoric Antarctica with dinosaurs. So I started working on that project. The idea was to have a one-man show that traveled around the country to get America to re-sign the contract, or the treaty, the Antarctic Treaty. The Antarctic Treaty came about because President Eisenhower, he was president during the International Geophysical Year. It was a year of international cooperation of all the scientists in the world. And it was so successful that he didn't want it to end. So he came up with the Antarctica Treaty, which states that no one owns Antarctica, all wildlife is protected, there's no commercial exploitation of the continent allowed, no mining, no oil drilling. All information is shared. Even at the height of the Cold War, the Soviets could come to any of our stations, look at what we were doing, and we could do the same with them. So it was this little oasis of sanity in the world. And ironically, it was the United States that was not going to re-sign the treaty because the first President Bush was a Texas oil man, and he wanted to open it up for drilling. So I did the first 5 paintings of my Antarctica series, and I invited the director of the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County to come see the paintings, and told him what my idea was, to have a traveling show to get the public educated about why Antarctica is so well worth saving. And he looked at the paintings and he said, "You got your show, and we will travel it for you." And they traveled my show for 7 years. Now, I used to say I subscribe to the Pinball School of Career Planning, bounce all over the place. But doing these Antarctic paintings, it was the first time, once I finished the show, I didn't want to stop. I wanted to keep doing this. So I came up with the idea of doing a book on the history of life of Antarctica from earliest prehistoric times to the present day. And man, that was my first huge jump into the fine art world, and made a gigantic difference in my career. I actually turned down some spectacular jobs in order to do this Antarctica show. So now I forgot what the question was, but anyway, that's part of the reason I travel and see things. That's right. So later, after the show opened, I found out that the National Science Foundation has something called the Antarctic Artisan Writers Program. And every year they pick 1 or 2 artists, writers, and photographers to go down to Antarctica. And so I applied for that grant, and I got that grant. And that was the best trip of my life. I got to spend 2 months based I got to spend 2 months based at Palmer Station, which is the smallest station in Antarctica. And I got to do 7 scuba dives underneath the ice. I camped out in the dry valleys.
Wow.
I had spectacular helicopter trips through the dry valleys. It was really stunning. I also climbed to the top of an active volcano, the one that overlooks McMurdo Station, and was able to look down inside the crater and see lakes of lava. It was absolutely stunning. So yes, all that stuff that I see eventually would get incorporated in one way or another into my work, into my paintings and art.
That's amazing. It sounds like that's the closest you can get to going to another world.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, they were training the Mars astronauts in Antarctica because it's so similar to Mars.
Oh, really? You talked about your dinosaurs. Some of my favorite artwork of yours is your dinosaur work. Can you tell people where your passion for dinosaurs started?
Oh, sure. It started right here. I was 3 years old, and my parents took me to see my very first movie. This was before we had a television, before anybody in the neighborhood had a television. And we went to the Reseda Drive-In, and they were showing a 1952 re-release of the original 1933 King Kong. And I think it did damage at a genetic level, because I've been nuts about dinosaurs ever since. And shortly after that, I saw the Rite of Spring sequence in Fantasia. And boy, I've been hooked on dinosaurs my whole life now. In the mid-'70s, a friend of mine, Don Glut, he had written a book called The Dinosaur Dictionary. And he decided that so many new dinosaurs had been found, he needed to update the Dinosaur Dictionary. And he asked me if I would do 4 pictures for the book, because his goal was to have at least 1 picture for every listing in the entire book. And I agreed to do 4, and it ended up I did 44. And my regular publisher, Byron Price, was visiting me from New York, and he was looking around my studio, and he said, "Bill, if you could do any book, your own book on anything, what would you do?" And I just thought he was being conversational. I really don't know. And he saw all these dinosaur dictionary pictures. He said, "Well, would you like to do one on dinosaurs?" I said, "Oh, sure, that'd be fun." And I forgot about it. And 2 months later, I get a phone call from Byron, and he said, "Bill, we got a book deal. Bantam wants to do your dinosaur book." Suddenly, I had this gigantic project dropped in my lap. 80 full-color paintings and I think 50 black and white illustrations. And man, so I really got into it heavily. I joined the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology. That's the scientists who study dinosaurs. So I could have access to all the latest information. And it was an incredible time, because at that time, because of my involvement with dinosaurs, I was finding out all kinds of things that the public wasn't finding out yet. It's a slow trickle down to where the public finds out what's going on. I found out that some dinosaurs had feathers, that they weren't slow, they weren't stupid, they took care of their young. And so I wanted my book to be the first book to collect all this new information about dinosaurs that was being discovered. So I did that, became a bestseller. I think the first printing was over 250,000 copies. It got translated into, I think, 7 or 8 different languages, and it made me the dinosaur man. And while I was doing that book, I thought, well, these had better be accurate. So I started contacting the scientists who had discovered each creature. And this is before email, so I had to snail mail Xeroxes of my sketches, and we had a back and forth until we were both happy with what I was drawing. And then I thought, well, the settings have to be accurate too. So I started studying paleobotany. Now, when I first started studying that, the study of prehistoric plants, there wasn't very much information. But the plant scientists started looking at the pollen, because regular plant material doesn't preserve very well or very often. But pollen is small, hard, and compact. So it preserves incredibly well. And by studying the pollen, they figured out suddenly entire forests and jungles and things that existed during the time of the dinosaurs. So I was the beneficiary of that knowledge as well. Well, I've been doing dinosaurs ever since, and I'm probably not going to stop. And my favorite thing in the whole world in terms of an art job is painting accurate reconstructions of prehistoric life as murals for natural history museums. And so far I think I've done 19 or 21 murals. My first 2 were for the Houston Museum of Natural Science, then I did 3 for Walt Disney's Animal Kingdom, and then 12. So if it was possible to just paint murals the rest of my life, I'd be the happiest guy on the planet.
While we're talking about dinosaurs, as new information comes out, how much does it excite you to incorporate that new information on how they may have looked or their positioning and posture, stuff like that? Like, do you get excited seeing those changes?
I do. I like to be on the cutting edge of what's new about dinosaurs. I'm on a list. I get notified every week about a new dinosaur species that's being found. This is a golden age for studying dinosaurs. And so, yeah, I try to incorporate all that stuff. The funny thing is, there's so much new information that our views of dinosaurs are changing so often that, of course, it puts older pictures out of date. But I use that as a teaching moment. I say, look, this is what we used to think that they look like, and now this is what we think they look like. And maybe in the next 5 years, we'll have a different opinion of what they look like. So really, the study of dinosaurs is a living science. It's constantly changing with fantastic new information. I never thought in my lifetime I would know the actual colors of dinosaurs, but by studying the microscopic structures of the feathers from the Chinese specimens, we're suddenly finding out what color they were as well, which is just extraordinary.
Can you tell people like what you've been working on and what they can expect anything new from you?
Oh, sure. Because of COVID, I think all 20 of my shows were canceled. So that gave me loads of time to do new art, because I wasn't traveling. I wasn't getting ready to set up for a show. I wasn't at the show, so I was at home. So I produced a ton of new artwork. Now, I also started working on a whole series of new books. Right now, I'm working on one with John Flesk, my regular publisher. It's going to be a 3-volume hardcover box set on all my comics work. Each book will be about 350 pages. I'm one of those pack rats who saves everything, so I was digging deep into my flat files, and I found stuff I had forgotten I had done, and it was really thrilling and exciting to come across all this old work. And then I'm also going to do a book on all of my underground comics. That'll probably be published by Last Gasp Publishing. I'm just about finished with the text for my most requested book, which is a book on all my music-related art. It's my album covers, my CD covers, band flyers, concert posters, all that kind of stuff. And I've been asked by a lot of people to write my autobiography because I've had a fairly colorful life, but that's just seemed too daunting and too intimidating. So what I'm doing is I'm writing a multi-volume autobiography. So in my book on comics, I talk about what I was doing in my life at the time I was doing these comics. The same with the underground comics, same with the music stuff. And so it's a real nice window into my life and what was going on while I was creating all these pieces. So I think the public will be amazed by the amount of work I did in comics, and also they'll see stuff they've never seen before. I think I'm the hardest guy to collect because I work all over the place. I tell my students, if you want to become famous, do the same thing over and over for a few years, and you'll be famous. Bernie Wrightson did Swamp Thing. Boom, he was famous. But I said, it's a trap, though. You have to be careful because Bernie was a close friend of mine, and he got really tired of drawing the Swamp Thing. So I get to draw whatever the heck I want, so you never know.
When it comes to your art, what kind of digital tools do you use for your art?
Well, most of my work is done traditionally, but when I do comics, I color my comics digitally, and do that in Photoshop. And also, even though I've done like an oil painting on canvas, I get all my work to it, and then I can clean it up, get rid of the hairs or the little specks of dust or little shiny spots. So digital is great for doing that. It's incredible. But I still like to have the feeling of art in my hands. I want to see it. I want to see ink and watercolor. I want to see how the artist did it. And you can't tell that from digital. Mm-hmm. Plus, also, you're cutting your income in half. If you're just strictly working digital, you don't have an original to sell.
Sure.
All right, so I promised my friend Tyler Baker that I would ask you this. He asked me to ask you about your involvement on the film Predator.
I was brought in actually by my pal Rick Baker on Predator. I was excited because it was my first big studio film. Some of the films I'd done before, like Conan the Barbarian, Conan the Destroyer, those were produced by Dino De Laurentiis. They were European productions. And in case of Conan the Destroyer, we made that one in Mexico City. So, let's see. What was the question?
Your involvement on the Predator movie.
Oh, on Predator. So, Rick Baker got hired to originally be the original creator of the Predator, and he called me up, and basically he got me hired to design the first Predator. And I had a meeting with the director and the production designer. Production designer was John Falone. The director was John McTiernan. And they had brought along a book of H.R. Giger's artwork. And they said, Bill, we wouldn't be uncomfortable if the Predator looked exactly like this. And they showed me a picture from the Giger book. And I said, well, you want it to look like Giger, why don't you hire Giger? You know. Anyway, so I did some drawings, and at the second meeting I said, John, I just want to tell you, this is going to be a fantastic film. You're going to capture two completely different audiences with this movie. He said, huh? What are you talking about? I said, well, you know, you're going to get the action adventure crowd because, you know, it's Arnold hunting down a predator in the jungle. Cool. But that ending is amazing. And that will get you a whole different audience. He says, what are you talking about? I said, well, at the end, Arnold kills the predator, and then he approaches the body, and he looks down and looks and looks, and he reaches down and he opens it up, and inside is this frail little alien. And I said, what an incredible metaphor for man as hunter who has to gird himself up with all this technology and everything to hunt animals. This is just a great comment on that. And so John sat there thinking for a little while. Then he opened up his script and reread it. And right in front of me, he tore those pages out of the screenplay. I said, John, what are you doing? He goes, well, we can't have an ending like that. That would mean Arnold beat up a wimp. So later, there were other designers put on Predator. I think it was Bob Short and his team who came up with the cool high-tech dreadlocks. And then some of Stan Winston's guys came up with that great four-pronged mouth. I thought that was really a cool addition to it. So that was my involvement in Predator. Originally, the film was called Hunter.
So that first drawing they told you that was Giger-esque, and they told you they wanted it to look like that. How different was that from the final Predator that we saw in the movie?
Oh, very different. Incredibly different. Yeah. For one, I'm not going to steal somebody's art. So yeah. I'm not going to make it look like Giger. If you want Giger, hire Giger. I want to come up with a creature that no one's ever seen before. I think that's much more exciting than copying someone else's creatures.
You said in your blog, that you had dodged a bullet when it came to the 1990 production of Princess of Mars. What other bullets have you dodged?
Wow. Let's see. Well, that's the one that really stands out. I worked on 4 different versions of that film, 4 different directors.
Oh, wow.
It was it seemed like a cursed project. And then the one that finally got made, I didn't work on at all. So that's pretty nutty. Oh, let me see. I got a film list here. Maybe that'll spark my memory. Well, Steven Spielberg asked me to storyboard Raiders of the Lost Ark, but we were sharing offices with Steven while I was working on Conan the Barbarian. So Ron Cobb and I would work on Conan during the day and then run across the hall to Steven's office and kick around ideas with him for his next project, which was Raiders of the Lost Ark. So, but both Ron and I decided to stay loyal to John Milius, our writer-director on Conan the Barbarian. And Ron did some designs for Raiders. He designed the big flying wing, for one. And then I did, just as a favor to Steven, I did some storyboarding of the sequence where Indy fights the German on the truck, fights the Nazis. There was one film I wrote a couple films for Roger Corman, but there was one called Galaxy of Terror, where I just basically came up with the concept and handed it off to Roger, and then a film was made out of it. The other one was one that I wrote the entire screenplay to. That was called The Warrior and the Sorceress. That was also for Roger Corman. And that was a funny situation. I was doing movie posters back then for Corman. I did the poster for Rock and Roll High School, for Up from the Depths, and for Lady in Red. And so I was keeping in touch with the art director there. And I said, what do you got going right now? He says, we're doing a film in Argentina called Kane of Dark Planet. I go, Kane of Dark Planet? I wrote that. I said, do you have a copy of the screenplay there? He says, oh, yeah, sure. I said, read what it says on the first page. It says, Kane of Dark Planet, a screenplay by John Broderick. I go, and? There was no and. And I like, wait a minute, the director just stole my screenplay from me? So I called my attorney. He immediately called Roger Corman. Roger Corman took money from the director and paid me. But that was one of those wacky situations. And then when it was finished, Roger called me up and said, Bill, would you like to see the poster for your film? I said, sure. So I drove across town, and there's this big poster, and now the film was no longer called Kane of Dark Planet. It was called The Warrior and the Sorceress. And I said, wow, this poster looks great, Roger. I said, there's... And he says, Bill, you have to understand, the idea of a poster is to get butts and seats. If they see a beautiful, sexy woman on the poster, they'll go see the film. Once we have their money, who cares if there's a sorcerer? So I was happy to see that my first choice for the lead was cast, and that was David Carradine. He was just a great guy to work with.
So, and going back to, I want to promote your book.
Sure,
There's so many amazing concepts in this book that I wish had made it into the movie, like your She-Ra. What are the things that you wish, made it into the movie that didn't make it into the movie?
Well, I've learned working on films, when you get that first screenplay, they're going to cut about a third of it. And that happened with Masters of the Universe. They cut out almost everything in Eternia. But they didn't do that until after I had designed Eternia. I had done loads of design work for what that world was going to look like. And so, but we never got to do it other than the throne room. And then a few exterior shots, which we shot at Vasquez Rocks, which is probably the most common place to shoot movies in California, that and Bronson Caves. My biggest regret is that, I fought hard on this, but just didn't win. And that was Skeletor Stormtroopers. To me, they look just like Star Wars Stormtroopers, except they're painted black. And man, I hate copying other people's stuff or having people think that I copied stuff. I submitted all kinds of different designs, but Gary Goddard, the director of the film, was a huge Star Wars fan, and he really wanted those guys to look like stormtroopers, except in black instead of white. So I still irks me every time I see those guys come on screen. But boy, working with Frank Langella, that was amazing. And the extraordinary thing to me is, here's a guy who has done phenomenal performances in some of the most important films ever made. His favorite role of all time is Skeletor in Masters of the Universe. And that just
brilliant performance.
Yeah.
Him and Meg Foster are amazing in that movie.
With those eyes that look like chips of ice. Oh,
Yeah.
incredible. Yeah.
So,
it was amazing.
a question about the script. I know a lot of it took place on Earth.
Right.
How much was Earth always in the script, or was that just because of budget cuts?
Earth was always in the script. It was the most of Eternia that got cut. And Earth was in the script because it's a heck of a lot cheaper to shoot contemporary America than it would be to create an entire new world of Eternia.
Well, as much as I love the movie, I think if it had your stormtroopers and your storyboards, it would have been a masterpiece.
Oh, thank you. And also look at the designs I did for Evelyn. I wanted her to have a big, bushy hair with little pearls and gems and stuff strewn through it. Because to me, with women, long hair is sexual power. And I was so disappointed when the director insisted that they cut her hair, because I wanted that big, ferocious mane.
Right. Here, anybody can see that.
Yeah, there she is. And she was based on the character, the fading actress character in one of my favorite movies, Sunset Boulevard, written and directed by Billy
Norma Desmond.
Yes, Norma Desmond. And that was my inspiration for Evil Lynn.
That's amazing.
I'm just so happy you know who Norma Desmond is.
So do you want to talk about Lizard Men?
Sure.
Oh yeah, my favorite character. Continuing with Masters, my favorite character in that is Sarod.
That was
so cool looking.
Favorite character.
Yeah.
And that's the first guy that gets killed off. It's like, he killed one of the other guys. It was so frustrating.
We were just talking about that the other day.
That was a fun design because I even designed the contact lenses for the actor. And the actor was great, Hans Mars. I have a rule. If it's a guy in a creature suit, it has to be an actor. It can never be a stuntman, because the actor will bring that suit to life. And boy, the way Hans, the way he moved, I had another experience that was similar with Return of the Living Dead with Alan Trout, who played Tarman. I designed the suit. It's a very different, unusual-looking zombie, but it was Alan who brought that suit to life. He could move as though his bones weren't connected. It was just fantastic. And
that's my favorite zombie ever. I have your action figure of it.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, well, that's what actors bring to the table. You're not going to get that from a stuntman.
How much did you create Sarod? And this goes for other characters too. Like, did the script say there's a lizard man? Did it describe him at all, or did you do concept for this lizard man and then they made it into the script?
The characters were not described at all. The only thing I had to go on was their name. Since his name was Sarod, I thought, well, he's got to be reptilian, S-A-U-R, Saurian. And so that was my jumping off point. But I just designed that completely by myself. And the director didn't see it till it was all finished art. And he saw it and goes, great, that's it. No changes. I love to hear no changes. So then with the Beastman, that was a different thing, because the Beastman was already a toy in the Masters of the Universe toy line. But what I like to do is I approach designing characters the way actors approach their acting roles, and that most actors will create a little history of their character. And so I did the same thing with Beastman and Sarod and the other characters. Is for each character I would create a little backstory that would tell where they were brought up, what kind of culture they came from, how they dressed, what their physical appearance was like. And so in the case of Beastman, I don't know if it shows up on the screen or not, but there are, on his costume, there are handprints. My idea was that he's about to leave his group of Beastmen people to join Skeletor. And so they all came up and they put paint on their hands, and they put their hands on his clothes to give him their power.
That's
and
amazing.
So it deepens the experience, because the one thing I didn't want to do was just throw those toys up on the screen and without any changes. That would have been so disappointing to the audience. I'd rather have there be suggestions of depth and a reality to this, because I figure if I can't convince myself it's real, I have no right to think that the audience will think it's real. So I'm the first person that has to be satisfied with, okay, I believe this now.
In fantasy and sci-fi, why do you think we as a people are so fascinated with lizard men?
Well, I think we're fascinated with lizard men because there are creatures that lived on this planet that were reptilian. We can go to the Natural History Museum and see their skeletons. I think that's one of the reasons people love dragons so much. It's dinosaurs are almost real dragons in a way, if you think about it. And so there's also the creepy factor. A lot of people are really creeped out by lizards and snakes and alligators and things, yet they love to watch them. They're fascinated by that. It's like no one really wants to live with monsters, but they'll go to a movie and watch the monsters and be scared for an hour and a half or 2 hours, and then come back, to reality. And I think that applies to the thinking about lizard people. I think there's a sort of a basic need or desire or curiosity to see a creature like that they don't feel threatened by, except while they're watching the film. And once they're out of the film, life is back to normal.
So I have a silly question. You
Sure.
worked with Arnold Schwarzenegger on 3 different movies?
Let's see. Conan the Barbarian, Conan the Destroyer, Predator, Red Sonja, and then I did art for an Arnold film that didn't get made. He was going to do a remake of Captain Blood.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
He's
Do
an
you have
extraordinary.
any... Oh, I'm sorry.
Sure, go ahead.
Do you have any funny stories about Arnold, or have you,
Oh,
did
yeah.
you interact with him at all?
Oh, yeah. For a long time in the art department of Conan the Barbarian was just 2 guys. It was me and Ron Cobb. Ron Cobb was the production designer. I started out doing storyboards, but then I started switching over to designing costumes and designing sets that Ron didn't have time to do. So we had this poster of Arnold, and it had all his stats, and I go, we're the same height, 6'3". Interesting. Then the director came in one morning and he said, okay, Arnold's coming in. He's been practicing his sword moves. I want everybody to come outside. There was a little pocket park next to our offices. We're going to watch Arnold do his stuff. I said, okay, sounds great. So we went outside. And before that, though, I was working away on a picture. So was Cobb. And in walks this guy, and my first thought is, oh my God, that's the most beautiful human being I have ever seen in my life. And it was Arnold. He was just wearing a pair of red trunks. And my second thought was, and he lies about his height. I'm 6'3", and I was looking down on the guy. So anyway, so we went outside to watch Arnold. We went through all his sword routines and stuff. He'd really been practicing a lot. Now, Arnold is really good at reading people, and he saw something in director John Milius's eyes. And he says, John, something's bothering you. And John said, yeah, well, not really. He said, no, I can see something's really bothering you. What is it? And Arnold says, it's the body, right? He goes, what? Yeah, I've got a bodybuilder body. You want more like an athlete body, yes? He goes, yeah, that'd be great, but, that's impossible. He goes, so if I trimmed here, and I trimmed here, and I trimmed here, that's what you're looking for? And John said, you can do that? 2 weeks later, Arnold came back, he had completely resculpted his entire body. And at that moment, I thought, when he has a goal, nothing will stop him from accomplishing it.
I know for bodybuilders, that's their art form.
Yes.
You know, they can control that. They put all their energy into it.
Yeah, through diet and exercise, he knew just how to reduce the size of certain muscles and give himself a more streamlined, sleek body. It was amazing.
So, how involved were you with the Red Sonja movie? Because I loved that movie as a little kid.
Yeah. It's funny. Arnold was originally going to play Conan in that film. It was going to be the third Conan film, and he hated the screenplay. He said, if you call me Conan in this movie, I will not be in the film. So that's why they changed his name to something else. I was hired mostly to do creature designs for that. A lot of creature designs. I don't think I did any of the costume designs on that one. I did some on the 2 Conan films, but not on Red Sonja. Glad you liked it, though.
Yeah, I still love it. I loved it as a kid. I had a Red Sonja outfit when I was a little kid.
Yeah. In making that film, Arnold fell in love with Red Sonja, with the actress.
Bridget Nielsen?
Yes. Yeah. His buddies, Arnold's buddies, kidnapped him, took him out to the middle of the desert, and they said, we're not going back until you get some sense. You stick with Maria, leave Bridget alone.
Wow.
I
don't blame him. Bridget was beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, she was almost like a female Arnold in a way.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that really appealed to Arnold.
What other events do you have coming up? We know about DragonCon, but are there any other events where people can see you?
I'm going to check in with PowerCon. Oh, and then I'm doing Comic-Con International this year. It's not going to be in July, though. It's going to be Thanksgiving weekend in San Diego. So those are the only shows I've got booked for this year, which is fine because it means I'm getting tons of art done, which is great.
Very cool.
So,
I really hope you go to PowerCon because I would love to see you. I'm going to make your She-Ra design into a costume.
Oh,
So I would love for you to see that.
Oh, I can't wait to see that. That'll be so cool. Yeah. They not only cut that costume, they cut She-Ra from the film. Pretty nutty. Yeah, I don't think they'd even done any casting on that before they cut her.
Oh, really?
So I have no idea who they were hoping to get.
Mm.
You know
I know
who would have been great would be she used to be married. Let's see. She's in House of Cards. Robin Wright Penn. I think she would have made.
Oh, yeah.
She would have been an incredible She-Ra.
She would have been.
The way she looked in Princess Bride, wow, incredible.
Who was your choice?
My choice was Alison Doody from The Last Crusade.
Ooh, that's a good choice too. You should be a casting director. Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you so
it's
much.
so good to see you, Rebecca.
It's wonderful to see you too. I miss you so much.
Yeah, and if I don't get to see you at DragonCon, at least I got to see you here.
And hopefully PowerCon.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much, Phil.
Okay, you're welcome.